If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. There are many forms of yoga, and the benefits are widely accepted. We are often challenged, however, to find when and how to incorporate yoga into our fitness plan. My guest is Will Thomas, owner of Yoga House Miami and HappyJointsClub.com. Will has been a stretching teacher since 2007 and has an interesting approach to teaching yoga and stretching. Will takes yoga beyond the goal of mastering of poses or performing simple stretches to finding a greater connection between the brain and the body. Will offers stretching classes that can be done in as little as 7 minutes and can benefit anyone who seeks to age well. All right. Well, welcome, Will, to the Aging Well podcast. I'd like to just kind of begin with learning a little bit about you, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
All right. Well, I'm 52, and for the last 15 years, I've been a yoga teacher. For the last, 12 or 13 of that, owning studios around Miami, Florida. And since COVID, have been a yoga teacher just on Zoom. So before that, I grew up in the U.S. South in Florida and Alabama, and I had a whole career in Latin American import-export. And on the side, I'm a musician and got a wife and 3 kids.
Great. So what kind of got you into yoga?
Well, interestingly, a buddy of mine from college, I ran into him one day and he's like, "Man, I just tried this hot yoga class and you got to go and check this out." And coming from him, it just sparked me in the right way to go and try it. As opposed to hearing it from, somebody else in my life that maybe I would have not been intrigued as much. But this guy and I were used to like doing not healthy things together. And so when he said this, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to try it. And I did. My wife and I went and took one of these classes and we're hooked right away.
Great. And then at what point did you decide to become an instructor?
A couple years into our practices, we had really gotten into it, and it started to become more important than the other jobs that we had. And we decided, okay, let's look for ways that we can incorporate this more into our lives and turn this into a business instead of trying to balance this passion with a different business.
Yeah. So just a case of following your passion and it just snowballed forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So we talk a lot on our podcast about stretching and cardio and strength training and all the different components of physical fitness. We touch on yoga a little bit, but really, what is the difference between stretching and yoga?
Well, I think there are some differences. There are some misconceptions as well, where yoga, as we commonly practice it today in the U.S., myself included in all those years of owning studios and being a teacher, it is really treated today as a sport. And by that, I mean, it's something that's measured externally, where in popular yoga today, we're focused on the pose itself and trying to get better at the pose. And we measure the pose by how it looks or how long we can hold it or the shape of the pose. And in doing the poses, sometimes we're stretching muscles, right? So the stretching part of popular yoga is almost a secondary effect or even an obstacle to get over in order to do a pose that you can measure externally. So there's yoga as a sport, and then there's stretching as a practice to try to address certain things in the body. And sometimes those things are intertwined, and sometimes they actually work against each other.
Okay. And what are the benefits of both? I mean, would you say one or the other, or would you say really both are necessary for a more balanced, healthy approach?
I would say it depends on what you're looking for.
Okay.
If you're looking for a sport, and not to discount sports in any way, but if you're looking for a sport for something that you can achieve over time and use those external measurements as a motivator, then popular yoga is the way to go. And you get better at the poses and you get where you're getting that confidence because you can do the poses better and because they look better. If that's what you're looking for, then for sure, yoga is a direction to go in. If you have an issue in your muscles or your joints that you're looking to address with blood circulation and range of motion and stability muscles, then I would say go for stretching because it's a direct application of that muscle activity and blood flow and brain power on the things that are going on in our body. When we approach it as stretching, we're getting right to the point instead of using it as using yoga as a sport where those muscle changes might be a byproduct, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I know you kind of do things a little bit differently. Um, how does your training program kind of differ from more traditional yoga?
Well, what do you think about trying a little bit? And
Okay,
I can demonstrate it.
sure,
Okay.
as best as we can
So
do audioly.
yeah, for sure, for sure. All right. So just sitting, you and everybody else, just sitting there. Let's do a breathing exercise, and I'll show you what I mean by stretching. So start with interlace your fingers under your chin, knuckles touching your chin. Now lift your elbows up so high that you feel it in your armpits and your ribs, right? So you're feeling stretching feelings in your armpits and your ribs. Now, just hold that feeling there and without moving anything, just flex your right arm muscles and then release them. And then your left arm muscles. And when you flex, do you feel some more little rusty places in your shoulders?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so do it again. Right side muscles, left side. Now, keep your arms there and pull your abdominals muscles back toward your spine and then up at your heart. And then back to your spine. And again, kind of reading. Pull your abdominals up to your heart. And then last one, just right leg muscles. Just flex, don't move them. And then left. And even sitting in a chair, do you feel little different sensations, little places that catch your brain?
Mm-hmm. A
And
little
then
bit.
do the left leg, and then that's all. Arms down to the side. That is using a pose in order to read the body, in order
Okay.
to look for those little rusty places in the body, to look for those little feelings that catch the brain that in normal operation, the brain will ignore. The brain will look at that little tight feeling in the shoulders as something, hey, that's going to distract us from what we're trying to do, whether it's work or do yoga as a sport or do some other kind of sport or any kind of physical activity. Those feelings that we just experienced on purpose are normally treated as either obstacles or things to otherwise be avoided. So that's what I mean. Stretching is a way to go inside and measure internally what's happening in the body.
Okay. So, from that kind of perspective, how does yoga fit into kind of the general components of physical fitness? I usually detail the health aspects of cardiorespiratory endurance, muscle strength, muscle endurance. Obviously, flexibility is, that's the pretty obvious one with yoga, body composition. And then we get over to the motor skill side where it's power, speed, agility, coordination, balance, and reaction time. How does it kind of fit within those as we look to train kind of holistically our physical fitness?
Yeah. Well, one thing about yoga, whether it's my kind of stretching yoga or yoga as a sport, is the speed of it. It's very slow.
Mm-hmm.
It's very contemplative. And in that way, we can look inside the body and we can realize details about the body that when we later go to do another activity that tests the speed, the agility, the balance, the mobility, we wouldn't be able to read when we're doing something that's kind of fast and furious.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing is the speed of the practice itself that I would say is a big difference between yoga and, let's say, a CrossFit or weightlifting or cardio
Mm-hmm.
activity.
And so, how would you fit that into kind of a general fitness scheme for somebody? We all have limited amount of time that we can do exercise. We have different goals. Where does yoga fit in that whole 24-hour a day opportunity cost kind of
Yeah.
situation?
For myself, it's an enhancement because when I do the introspective work and I really pay attention to what's happening in this joint and in this little muscle and in that little muscle, then when I go to do something that's cardio or I go to do something that's more explicitly resistance training, I feel like my brain has more information
Okay.
about how it's going to react to those activities and what's best in those activities and maybe what I need to avoid in those activities. So I get more done more quickly in the other activities because I've done the introspective work and my brain and my body kind of have a better idea of what's good for it.
Okay.
So
And
that's how
so,
it fits in is it makes the other things more efficient.
okay, so kind of enhances the whole physiology of function.
Correct.
Okay. And how much time should we contribute to this on a daily, weekly basis in order to get the best benefits from it?
Yeah. Again, it depends on um, what you have going on. If it's sort of a general sense that you'd like to feel more mobility in your body and inform the other things that you do, then I've got a little 7-minute video that you can. My website, by the way, is called happyjointsclub.com. And you can go to that website, happyjointsclub.com. And through there, you can access a video of a 7-minute routine, 7 minutes that you can do every day or every other day to give you a general sense of what's happening in your muscles and joints. If you have a particular issue in your knee or your shoulder or somewhere in the body, then the practice that I do, it's about 40 minutes a day.
Okay. So we will link that video and your website and everything in the program kind of description in the notes. And so we'll make sure everybody
Okay,
has
cool.
access to that. Um, so 7 minutes, that's pretty reasonable. I mean, one
For
of the
sure.
biggest hiccups for me with stretching is that it takes a significant amount of time. And to me, it takes away from many of the aspects of my other training, the cardiorespiratory, the muscle strength, muscle endurance, and so on.
Yeah.
And I've generally kind of taken a more of a stance that stretch the things that are bothering you and then let your mobility be improved through the activity itself. But it kind of sounds to me like there's some benefit to doing this type of yoga, maybe even before the exercise, in order to just kind of wake up the muscles, wake up those brain to muscle connections so
For
that the
sure.
activity is going to be safer and more effective. Would you kind of agree with
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Because typically I too teach stretching after the exercise when you're all warmed up, but it again seems like this would be much more beneficial before as opposed to after, almost more as like a dynamic warm up to the exercise as opposed to a strict improving range of motion kind of activity.
Yeah. I would say
Thoughts on
there are
that?
benefits to both.
Yeah.
There are benefits to doing it before because of, as you say, uh, sort of gathering the information and
Hmm.
just getting things um, uh, woken up a little bit. Also, benefits to doing it after once you're warmed up and you can get
And
a little bit more information.
it's also something that can be a bit more compartmentalized in the workouts as well, where you do your cardio workout one day or one session in the day, weights another time, and then setting aside some time specifically for some yoga activity.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the ways that it helps me to fit it in to the schedule is that as opposed to gearing up for a regular yoga class or some sort of exercise activity, I look at this as more information gathering.
Hmm.
I'm going to do this practice, whether it's my little 7 minute thing or even my 40-minute thing. I look at it as reading the body. I'm getting information about the body. I'm not expending energy as I do in a cardio or resistance training. I'm receiving information. I'm putting information in my brain that it otherwise wouldn't get about the body. And just that kind of attitude, that approach to it helps me fit it in more
Okay.
because I don't feel like, I've got to gear up this energy in order to do this activity. It's more whatever is going on with me right now. I just want to know more about it, whether
Hmm.
I'm tired or energetic or somewhere in between. So that helps me to to do it more often because
Okay.
it's just a whole altogether different thing. Even though I'm doing this physical activity, um, it's it's a really 180-degree different approach to it.
Okay. It sounds almost meditative as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. As
Okay.
far as getting the brain to think about, something internal
Mhm.
for some amount of time and thereby calming the brain down. Yeah.
Sounds good. So, how does this fit into our concept of aging well? How does yoga benefit me over the long haul of my life from your perspective?
Well, what it does for me is it, at the same time, it gives me a sense of my body is where it is and it's going to be where it's going to be, and time and gravity and age are going to have their effects, right? Like that's an inevitability, and I can either ignore that or I can actively try to fight it, or I can use this practice to just stay in touch with the details of what's happening in the body and move as well as I can, balance as well as I can, and stabilize as well as I can, given what's inevitably happening. And for me, that comes out as optimism.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, time's going to do what it's going to do, but I stay with it. I stay informed. I stay involved, and therefore I stay more optimistic.
Yeah. That's a good way of approaching it. I tend to think my approach to aging is much more the fighter. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it's the same thing. It's trying to fight off that decline. I'm a little less likely to say it's inevitable. I mean, there's a certain level of inevitability there, but I think some of that is how much we accept is what is inevitable and what we're willing to let our bodies become as we age. And it really
Yeah.
sounds like, this practice, and it's something I've been trying to push myself to engage in a little bit more. And so this conversation is going to encourage me to try a little bit, maybe just starting with the 7-minute yoga program to kind of deal with some of the minor issues that I have that are just kind of wear and tear on the body. But
Yeah.
I think yoga is something that we should be considering as part of our plan to age well.
Yeah. Well, balance in all things, right?
Right.
I agree with you that that healthy amount of fight is really important. Because the more I study it, it's the experts say that muscles are what are going to carry us literally
Right.
into old age. It's muscles. That's what we need to be focusing on. And so that spirit of, man, I'm gonna keep those muscles up and that resistance up and that activity up, I think is for sure. Um, that's part of my mentality as well.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of that moderation within it as well. I've been, in fact, our last podcast, talking with a psychologist about kind of fighting off dementia and helping to kind of counteract some of the cognitive decline that we see in aging. Um, just got me thinking about this J shape that we talk about a lot in exercise science, which is linked to the immune system. It's called Neiman's J. It was David Neiman, who's a exercise physiologist at Appalachian State, first kind of coined the term, and it's looking at upper respiratory tract infection. And if you're sedentary, you have kind of kind of a moderate average risk of getting sick in cold and flu season. If you're exercising moderately, it actually decreases that risk dramatically. And if you continue to increase the intensity and the duration of the exercise, it actually becomes less beneficial to the point where if you're training very intensely and for very long periods of time, you actually have a higher risk than somebody who is sedentary. And I think we see kind of that same aspect in all aspects of health. If we're doing something more moderately, we're going to reap the greater benefits from it. If we go all in with heavy weight training, powerlifting, getting really super strong, those individuals aren't living quite as long or as healthy because they start having more joint issues, and they don't favor their heart health as well, because they're ignoring cardiorespiratory. And we see the same in endurance athletes. Endurance athletes that go whole hog into doing like ultra marathons and things like that, they start to lose muscle mass. And as they age, they begin to decline much more rapidly in terms of their physical activity. And so I see it as kind of a bit of a moderate approach that's going to keep us in balance. And I think what you're talking about here with the link between the mind and the muscle through yoga is one of those healthy steps that we can take to kind of keep us in that middle, that we can be more aware of what's happening in our body as we age, where we might be pushing ourselves a little too hard, maybe causing a little bit of joint issues, and how we can back off from that, what we need to change in order to do that more effectively. Does that make sense?
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and I think if we just look at that concept of what is moderate, to me, it means that the brain is engaged and the brain is paying attention to what's happening. And we're purposely keeping it in a range, in a zone that we defined as moderate. And as we get on one end of the spectrum, very sedentary, or on the other end of the spectrum, super active, both of those extremes involve a little bit of shutting the brain off and purposefully not listening to what the body is telling us, whether we're doing zero or we're pushing our limits. That pushing the limits involves, just do it, shutting the brain off and going for that external measurement and discounting or actively ignoring how the body feels. Whereas if we keep it in the moderate zone, that means that we're paying attention to, is it enough? Is it too much? And we're keeping that brain body connection closer.
Yeah. And I think, we've kind of evolved a bit in the fitness industry to be pushing more and more aging adults to doing training that is more sport like training. We train like an athlete. Well, you don't want to train like an athlete because athletes beat the crap out of their bodies in order to push those limits, to overcome the restrictions that are limiting performance. And that's where we, deal with the injuries and so on. And so
Yeah.
again, the more we're talking, the more I'm liking this idea of, kind of bringing some yoga into the training in order to keep that brain muscle joint connection and, limit the harm that we could be doing to our bodies, but still be pushing up our limits to where we're growing, we're adapting even as we age.
Yeah, for sure.
So when should one start doing yoga? When we're talking about getting old and a lot of us start thinking, oh, I'm starting to get those creaks in my joints and my muscles are aching. I maybe have to stop lifting. I got to start doing some yoga. When do you really think people should start doing yoga? I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
I think as soon as they think it's important to get information from their body.
Okay.
I'll say it that way.
I would probably go beyond that and say, even before that, because oftentimes we don't start thinking about we need to get that information until we are getting old.
All right.
I think it's something that, and I think some schools are involving that in some of the PE programs, what few PE programs we kind of still have in this country.
Yeah. Right,
But getting kids involved with it a little bit younger. I think athletes, it would be a very useful thing for them to be doing some yoga in conjunction with their normal training to help with that body awareness and, knowing, hey, maybe I'm pushing it a little bit too hard here. I'm not going to be able to adapt as well. And so they can communicate that with coaches, and you're going to ultimately have better performance over the long haul. I know there's, some programs. I remember even when I was in college still, the football program at West Virginia University, where I did my bachelor's and my master's degree, they were starting to kind of have the football players doing some yoga. And I had some friends that were on the team, and they would joke about how hysterical it was to watch some of these linemen trying to get into some of these poses and things like that. And it's really kind of taking them beyond the normal awareness of their bodies that they have with their sport, which, like you said, you're going to tend to go to overriding some of those aches and pains in order to perform better, to getting them a little bit more aware of their bodies.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So I think, maybe it's something we need to incorporate probably a little bit earlier in life rather than later.
Definitely. And I temper it a little bit. I know that you work with it's high school athletes.
Yeah, I'm working with the wrestling team, my son's high school wrestling team right now.
Yeah, and I've got a son who's starting his senior year in high school, and I've got two daughters that are close to teenage age. So I temper it a little bit by saying as soon as you're ready to get more information from your body, because I know how stubborn these kids can be.
Yeah.
And for sure how I was at that age and how I didn't think it was important. So yes, I think the work that you're talking about that some programs are doing in schools to get yoga and to get that idea that it is important, teaching people that it is important is great. Yeah, the earlier the better.
Yeah,
is definitely my answer.
And so, what do you do personally to age well? This is a question I always ask of my interviews. What are you doing in your life to kind of age well? You said you were what, 51, 52?
52. Mm-hmm.
52. So you're a little younger than me, but
okay. I think a general sense of I'm trying to pay attention. I think it's like 5 years ago now that I kind of stumbled on this approach of, quote, stretching instead of, quote, yoga. And that, just that change where I started paying more attention led me to change the way that I eat. And since then, I've done different eating plans, and I pay attention more than I used to. So for me, I'm aging well by paying attention to more of the little details about how I feel physically, and then changing how I move or what I eat, reacting to how I feel. And I find out how I feel in this proactive stretching practice.
Okay.
So the short answer is, I'm trying to pay attention more in order to age well.
Sounds good. And so kind of in closing, can you kind of share with the listeners how they can connect with you, and what type of product you basically are offering that they can avail themselves to?
Yeah, so I have, like I said, through the website happyjointsclub.com, you can go and get a YouTube video that can get you started with a little 7-minute thing, and then if it works for you and you have an issue that you'd like to get a little deeper in, whether it's a knee or a shoulder or something orthopedic that way, then I have a schedule of Zoom classes. It's about once a day on Eastern Standard Time, sometimes in the morning and sometimes at night. And I do a live Zoom class, and people from all over will join in, and we'll do that. Then I have a library of videos that people can use on their own time of longer classes that they can do to address the whole body and work on specific issues that they have, like I say, lower back or knee or something in the shoulder. So it's all through the website, happyjointsclub.com.
Okay, and we'll share that link in the program notes, and as well the video. Any other last minute comments that you have, or anything else you left to share?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and I encourage you to give that 7-minute thing a try, and look at it as receiving information that you're then going to go and use in your cardio and resistance, etc., and see how it works for you.
I will do that. I promise you I will try it out. And maybe in a future podcast, my co-host Corbin and I can kind of both do it and kind of share our experiences and talk a little bit further about it. And I hope the listeners will actually try and engage with it and see what they think. And if they have any comments, I also share a link where they can share audio comments with me or email me, and maybe we can share those back as well. But until then, we'll just encourage everybody to do their yoga and keep aging well. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.